Today I want to talk about strategies to figure out what's going on with your front crotch if it's got wrinkles and you can't figure them out. Before I get started, I want to remind everybody that if you've been struggling to fit your garment and you just can't get it, I do offer Zoom Fit Lab. It's a 1-hour private Zoom session where we can work on fine-tuning the fit of something you have in progress. There is a link in the description below if you want to check that out. So the first thing to think about is the front crotch curve is really a mini version of the back crotch curve. So in the back you have your behind, and the shape of the crotch wraps around, meets the front crotch extension. The same way the front crotch curve wraps around your pubic bone and reaches around to the back crotch extension. So the position, size, and shape of the front crotch needs to agree with you just like the back crotch needs to. So the first thing you want to do if you're experiencing or seeing wrinkles around your front crotch, the first thing to try to do is to fix it in a vertical direction, because it's very easy and non-invasive to, try picking it up. And if I just, try picking it up like this, let's say, I can pick it up a little bit and get rid of a little bit of the vertical length here. That could improve it. Picking up the vertical length may improve it, or letting it down may improve it. So look for clues. Do the wrinkles around the crotch look tight? If they look tight, try lowering it. And if they look loose, try picking it up. So that's the first thing you can do to start to evaluate what's going on with the front crotch. So if fixing it vertically does not help, the next thing I would try is adjusting the depth of the curve in the front. So if we look down here, you can see that I have my front right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw in the seam allowance, and I'm just going to dash it in like this. And I'm using one of my friction pens here, so I'll be able to erase it. So we can talk about other things because I don't want it to get too messy, but I'm trying to save paper, so now I can erase on my friction pens and then not have to use 20 pieces of paper to show you one thing, which I think is kind of cool. So if your crotch is sewn like this, you can try, and I'm going to use, a different color. Let's use pink. You can try coming in a little bit closer to the raw edge, which would decrease the amount of scoop. Okay, you could do that. And what that does is it actually gives you more fabric on the outside, and it reduces the inside space if you sew deeper to the raw edge through the crotch curve. That may fix it. If that doesn't fix it, I'm just going to erase this so we can stay nice and neat. You can also scoop in deeper, sometimes taking fabric away from the outside and adding more room inside helps. Those are things that you can try to fix wrinkles or the way it's hanging on your body. The reason why this can be confusing is when you're wearing your pants, it may feel that the front crotch is pulling away from you, right? So you think you need to make it shorter. So for example, if it's pulling away from you, you may try to scoop or unscoop a little bit like this, right? That makes it shorter, and you would think that that would fix it, but sometimes that could make it worse. And actually scooping and making a deeper curve is what it needs to be able to sit against your body. So a lot of times when you're working with fitting the crotch, especially the front crotch, you're looking for the wrinkles, you're looking for the clues, but you're also feeling how it feels. So you want to pay attention to how the crotch is feeling. If you've tried those two things and it's just not working, the other option would be to either extend or reduce the crotch extensions. Maybe you have too long of a crotch extension or too short of a crotch extension. So I'm going to bring in my back leg here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw my 1/2 inch seam allowances in, because you never want to include those when you're trying to figure out what you're working with, because those are not part of the length that you have. So I've got my seam allowances here. I'm just going to overlap these like this on the line. Okay, so you can see here, this is now the length of my crotch extensions. So if you feel like it's pulling and it's tight, you could let these out a little bit to see if that works. So what I want to talk about today is a strategy to try to figure out if the amount of depth I have in my pattern is enough for the depth of my body. So I'm going to take this pants muslin off so we can look at these legs. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is, if I look at this from a side view, you can see, from here to here, obviously, from this thigh measurement, either the outer one, or I guess it could even be the inner one, if you look in here, the crotch extensions need to be that width, and probably a little bit of extra wiggle room for ease. I've seen in other fitting books where they tell you to measure the outer thigh, okay, and that's going to give you what you need as a minimum for what you have here. So for example, in this book by Gina Ray Dunham, she recommends measuring the outer thigh and using that as a gauge to compare the depth of your crotch pattern. And if the depth of your crotch pattern is narrower than your body measurement, then you would add to it. And if it's too long, you could shorten it. I came up with a different way to do it. And if anybody has taken my pattern review class, Stretch Jeans Made Easy, I tried to quantify the difference between the straight parts of the crotch and the curved or base of the crotch, and to figure out the width or the depth at the base of the crotch curve, I was using both thighs and a one thigh measurement to figure it out. So instead of just trying to measure the outer thigh or the inner thigh, I was measuring both thighs and doing some simple math. So just to explain to you what I'm talking about here, the first thing I would do is I would measure around both thighs like this. And notice I'm not catching any cheek in that measurement. So it's just the upper thigh. And for this one, I'm getting 32 inches. But we have a pretty good split between these legs here because this is a pants form. So I'm going to guess I'm going to take out 1.25 inches from that measurement, because I feel like when you measure this on your body to do it, you want your legs together. You want to capture the outer part of both of your thighs together. Okay, so I got 32. I'm going to knock that down to 30 3/4 because of the gap here. So if you want to try this at home, you're going to measure both thighs together. And I got, we'll say 30 3/4 for both. Then you're going to measure one. And so again, I'm going to put my tape measure same thing, don't catch any cheek. You're just going to measure the upper thigh. Okay, and I'm getting 20. All right, so one thigh is 20. So what you do with these numbers is you divide the two thigh measurement in half, because we want to find out what the outer measurement of one of the thighs is. So we have 15, so it equals 15 3/8 is half of the double or both leg measurement. Then we're going to minus that from the total single upper thigh measurement. And we're basically going to get 4 5/8. Okay, so what that captures is what the inner thigh is doing. So instead of trying to measure the outer thigh, which I'm not saying measuring the outer thigh is a bad idea, this Gina Renee Dunham book is a really good basic fitting book. It's got a lot of good information in it, so especially if you're new to fitting, the illustrations and the explanations are really easy to follow. So I do recommend this book. I'm putting a Amazon affiliate link in the description below to this book. But my thing is, if you're just trying to measure the outer thigh, where do you stop and start, right? It's a curve. And then the other thing is, with the way I'm showing you, between measuring both legs, dividing that in half, measuring your upper thigh, minusing it out to get the inner thigh. So we've captured 4 5/8 doing that math. And if I just try to measure the outer thigh, let me just see what I think I would get here. I feel like the outer thigh, like even if I'm not measuring all the way, the smallest measurement I can get, well, the smallest measurement, but I mean, I'm trying to get just the outer thigh, I would say would be like 5 or 5.5, which is almost an inch longer than what I calculated for the inner thigh. So you can see already going into this that trying to either identify the outer thigh or the inner thigh might not be super accurate and spot on. Part of what can happen when you're trying to capture the whole outside of both of your legs, depending on how your legs are shaped, things can get trapped in the inner curves of both front and back that you're not capturing in that double leg measurement. And then when you minus it out, divide it in half and minus out the total leg measurement, the total leg measurement might end up being bigger than the half measurement because you're capturing everything. You're measuring all the way around the leg. So doing it the way I'm explaining too might be a little bit limited, but it can give you an idea. But let's say you want to try this. So I'm going back to my 4 5/8 inch answer here. I'm going to just put my inseams together like this. And then let me just finish drawing my seam allowance, because remember, if you're going to measure now, you're going to measure the stitching line, not the edge of the pattern, because this seam allowance is included in the inside space because it's not there when you sew. So what you want to identify now is, where do I measure? Like, where do I measure across? So what I would say is, we're trying to get the depth of the pattern. So I'm going to find the place where the crotch curve, really the middle of the curve in the front and the back. So where it starts to curve, so somewhere in here and somewhere in here. This particular pattern is for a low full hip. So you can see here, if I measure across here, okay, I'm getting, if I just measure from here to here, I'm getting 6 inches. So from here to here is almost 6 inches. If I measure slightly up, it only increases by, not even 1/4 of an inch. So somewhere down in here where the base of the crotch is, where the fabric's wrapping around through the base of your crotch, is where you want to measure. And then you can use these, measurements to figure out, gee, do I have too much depth in my crotch, or do I not have enough? So in this example, because my inner thigh measured 4 5/8, and I would say let's add a 1/2 inch to that. because you need a little bit of ease. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch here. So we're going to say that's 5. Let's say it's 5 inches. So in this case, I measured across and I got almost 6 inches here. And if I looked at my pants and I felt like the crotch was pulling, or was popping out, or was away from my body, that may be a sign that, gee, let me take in my inseams and shorten the crotch in the front to see if that draws that in. So even though the numbers might not be, spot on and exact, if you end up with a number doing the math for the inner thigh, or if you want to use the outer thigh, whichever, and it's significantly smaller than your pattern, use that as a guide to try to shorten your front crotch extension, especially if you don't see any pulling anywhere else. So I wanted to explore this idea to see if there was, any real value in it. Another thing I would say is maybe measure twice. Measure once, do the math, and then measure again and do the math and take the average of your answers, because my guess is if you measure a few times, you might get a few different answers. So depending on, how tight you hold the measuring tape, or how loose you hold the measuring tape, or how you're standing, all of these different things can vary the answers you get. So once you get your final answer, use it as a guide to trend to either extend your crotch extensions or decrease your crotch extension in the front. So again, in the example I'm sharing with you here, my math gave me 4 5/8. I added a 1/2 inch for ease, so we'll round it to 5. And then when I measured, my space was 6 inches. So I've already added a 1/2 inch of ease. So in that case, that's maybe telling you need to shorten your front crotch extension to draw it in towards you. If you get an answer that's significantly smaller, then that would be your indication to maybe let out those crotch extensions. So this is just me noodling around and looking at things different ways and trying to come up with ways that that can help you fine-tune the fit of your pants pattern. I use this method myself for me, and the way my legs are shaped, I get a pretty accurate inner thigh measurement to my depth of my pattern that fits me. All right, so I thought this was just a fun look at, taking some measurements and trying to figure out your inner thigh measurement, or if you want to use your outer thigh measurement, that works too, to determine whether or not your inner space or depth in your pants pattern is an appropriate length for you. Remember, even if it doesn't give you completely accurate results based on the shape of your legs, you can use it as a guide to either lengthen or shorten your crotch extension if you've tried everything else. So I just think it's another fun thing to look at. If you have any questions or comments, please post those below and I will help you. If you're enjoying my content, consider liking and subscribing to my channel because it helps me grow. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.